Okay, so here we are up to part 13 of the Dora build. I got something accomplished this week, but not as much as I wanted to, and I'll explain that later in the video. I only got to come down here for a couple days because Wednesday we had to take Molly to the vet, and man, what a mess. We got her spayed. She had those dew claws, and she actually has them on all four of her legs, but they said the ones in the rear are the worst, so they wanted to take them off. And a dew claw is like another claw about a few inches up from their paw that's on the side of their leg. And so they wanted to do that when they did the spay. And plus we got her a microchip in her, I guess they do it in the back of their neck. And then you figure she had IVs running in her leg. So we took her up there Wednesday morning, went up and got her about 4:30 in the evening, and that was a mess. They were supposed to leave us with some pain pills for her, and they didn't. And everybody was gone, but this little young girl is a receptionist. She didn't know what she was doing. So we brought her home, and she didn't have no pain pills, but she was pretty much still knocked out of it. I think they gave her some kind of shot after the operation to alleviate some of the pain. But anyway, I brought her home. They had her hind legs bandaged up, got her home, got her out of the car, and the one bandage fell off. So later on, we managed to get one on by ourselves, but later on that evening I took her out to the yard to go do her thing, and the other bandage fell off. Well, by then that pain medication had wore off. She would not let you near that hind leg. She went nuts. So we got a comb for her head. I'm going to show you a picture over here in a minute. The poor little thing. This is what is this, Friday evening. She's doing pretty good. It's been 2 days now, and she's getting along pretty good, but you just don't touch them back legs. She's not a happy camper. But anyway, the first night, the cone that they gave us for her head was a piece of crap. So I sat up with her all night. I let her sleep. She slept on the couch next to me, and I sat up all night. I was up for over 26 hours. I stayed up because she could get that hind leg up to her mouth and lick on it. She couldn't get to the stitches on her belly from the spay, but yeah, she could get to that hind leg. So I had to sit up with her all night to make sure she didn't rip them stitches out. And then the next day we went down to try and get it bandaged back up, and they said, nah, just leave it go, just keep an eye on her. I was like, yeah, right. So that's why here it is, you know, for 2 days I haven't done nothing. I've just been, somebody's been sitting with her constantly, because every once in a while she wants to lick them stitches on her legs. So I really didn't get a lot done, but I did accomplish a couple things, and you'll see that in the video. By next week I'll be able to get a lot more accomplished down here. All right, so let me show you a little picture of the dog. she does a pretty good job. She's sleeping all day, but you know, and then you take her outside and go to the bathroom, and she just runs around like nothing's happened. But boy, she has trouble sleeping, because then when she lays her leg down, it rests right on where them incisions are, and yeah, I feel for her. All right. Let me get you a picture of her. I know this is supposed to be about the Dora, but I got that confused. I got the dog. Dora, dog, never mind. Here she is. Okay, here she is. She's pretty used to that cone. It don't bother her too much, but you can see her, what I say about that being a crappy cone, her head's sticking out the end of it. So no wonder she can take that hind leg, and right there is one of the incisions where they took that dew claw off. And then you can see her belly incision. But and I think she's laying on the concrete floor down here because it's nice and cool. Oh, there she goes. She's getting up. I got her a little bed down here. There she goes. There she is. But yeah, we have to keep an eye on her because she can get that paw right up there to her mouth, and she wants to lick them stitches. All right, enough about the dog. I just explaining why I haven't got much done this week. She was more important to me than that model. All right, so let's get on to the model. All right, here we go. This is take 2. I was talking to you guys for about 5 or 10 minutes and didn't realize I looked up at the camera and it wasn't on. I thought I forgot to push the record button. All right, so here we are. I got all the photo etch on my catwalks. All right, they're ready to go on. But before I do that, I want to make sure I got everything done that I could get done on here, because I don't want to be handling this once them catwalks go on any more than I have to. All right, because then it becomes real fragile. So I got to thinking, I thought, man, there's something I got to do, and I can't think of what it is. I looked through my directions, and I thought, I got all the parts on I can get on. I do have to get a railing or 2 up here yet, but I'll wait until I get these catwalks on. Then it finally dawned on me. If you remember a couple videos ago, I was showing you how I thought this ran down the railroad tracks, and this 2 bridges were sitting right on top of my railroad cars, right on that photo etch. And I explained how, well, it couldn't do that. There had to be a gap there so it could turn. And I'll show you a picture here. See if I can get you in view here. Where am I at? Right here. You can see right in here, they show a gap between these large bridges and those smaller bridges. There's a gap in there. Okay? And if you remember, when I test fit it, it was sitting right on top. This large bridge was sitting right on that smaller one. It was almost touching the tracks, and it was resting on this one car here. So I said how I was going to have to raise this up, come up with something. Now why they didn't figure that into the molding process, I don't know, because they definitely show it to you there. All right. So what I done was, every time I go to the hobby store, excuse me if you're seeing the top of my head, I'll pick up some styrene, okay? And I also pick up some sheets of it, you know. They come in a bag, sheets of styrene. So I always got some of that laying around, so, you know, in case like this, something comes up, I don't have to run over to the hobby store to get it. So let me show you what I've done here. So I had some 1.5 millimeter thick styrene sheet, all right? So I cut strips out of it, and I put them on there. Now you can't see them because they're covered up, but there's 1.5 millimeter strip styrene in here, okay? I made a little square box around that hole that's in the part here. And then I trimmed it. Once it's set up, I went along and trimmed it, and it's kind of the shape of a stop sign, an octagon. I trimmed off the corners and kind of gave it a, you know, a rounded effect. And I did that in all 4 spots, 2 on each one. So then I went into the other room because I got the railroad car sitting in there on the tracks, and I laid it on there, and yeah, it raised it up. It raised it up 1.5 millimeters off of them railroad cars, and it looked all right, but I wasn't happy with it. I thought, nah, it needs to go a little more. So then I got a 0.5 millimeter plastic that I had, and I cut it square, and I punched a hole in it with my hole punch, and then I glued it on there, and once it's set up I came along and trimmed out the square opening that's in there. So now it looks like there's a flat plate and then a round piece in here, and it looks more prototypical, but you're not going to see that. Nobody's ever going to see that. So then I went back in there and set it back on my railroad cars, and just that 1/2 millimeter extra that I did made it look a lot better. Raised it up. So now I got 2 millimeters there total. I raised it up a total of 2 millimeters. And also with making this square like this, it gave it more stability on there. All right, there's a bigger surface. Before, you know, you had all this resting on there. Now you got just this square here, but it gave it a little bit more stability. Those smaller railroad cars, these bridges here, I wasn't going to glue that all together. Okay, I was going to leave that apart so that if I ever wanted to take this somewhere, I could take this all apart. But with these sitting on there, it's rocking. Now maybe once it's all together, it'll stabilize it. But I think I'm going to go ahead and glue this together. I won't glue the bigger part, but I think I'm going to have to glue these cars together. But yeah, once I've done that, it raised it up and gives me that appearance. If you can see that space there. So that's what I was shooting for, and that's what I got. So I'm happy with that. I'm surprised they didn't come up with something, you know. Surely somebody had to put this together, you know, from the factory to test fit it, and didn't see that. And that brings the question here. I got a comment from a guy, and he was saying, well, why didn't you make a display base with a curved track? You know, yeah, you can build your own track and ballast and ties, but he said you ought to put it into a curved position like it was in the firing position. Well, one of the problems you got is because of the way they made this, that's a square hole. And the part on that one small bridge in there is a square peg that goes up in there. So if I had made a curved track, I would have had to, it would have been no problem making this a round hole, but how do you turn a square peg into a round hole? So yeah, you could mess with it and use maybe some brass or something, but I wasn't going to screw with it. You know, it looks fine the way it is, sitting on that straight track. But he was just commenting that everybody that builds one of these, it's always sitting on a straight section of track, never on a curved section. I have seen, you know, looking through some of the, off of Google, looking up this model, there is one guy, I do believe, put his on a curved section of track. But this is fine for me. So, that's where I'm at. The next thing to do is get this photo etch and this catwalk on here. I've showed you this before. I just got to get it glued on. I'll do this one and then that one. I'll let that set and then come along and start putting railings on it. So that'll be my next step. Alright, but I'm glad I thought of them things. If I'd have forgot them and had this, oh man, I'd play hell trying to handle it, without breaking anything off. All right, on to the next section in a minute. All right, here we are back. As you can see, I've got the catwalk and the railings on, and that is on both sides. All right, here's the other one. Okay. That one, and then the larger one on the outside. Now these are pretty much completed. I've got a little piece of railing, little section of railing goes back here. I'm going to hold off for a few minutes on that. And then there's some railing goes up here. But now, believe it or not, I am working on around step number 13 to 15 or 16, something like that. And the very last step in the book at the directions is step number 40, and that's when they want you to put this railing on back here. I think I'll probably hold off and do that for the sole reason there's a lot going on yet. But you know what though, that's up in the front. I might be able to go ahead and do that. That's up in the front. I thought that was in the back. But that's up in the front, so I shouldn't have no problem. I should be able to go ahead and get that on there. I think I will. Because I thought it was in the back where I got all this work going on back here, but it's not. It's up front. So I'll go ahead and get this railing on too. And then I got a couple little ladders that's got to go on here yet. So I'm going to be working on them ladders next, and then I'll get this railing on. I've got quite a few good responses on my question from last week's video on what were all these valves for. And in one of my videos, or in that video, I can't remember when it was, I think it was in that video, I'm not sure. But I said that these things right here look like hydraulic pistons or rams or whatever you want to call it. And the first response I got, and I hope I don't destroy your name, Ian, or Ian, however you pronounce it, Decree. He was the first one to give me a good answer, that he seems to think the same thing, that these were probably hydraulic pistons, that when they got to where they wanted to be, they adjusted these valves to put a downward force on this to settle it down onto the well, ground, more or less. So that means that this down here, it looks like it's all one solid piece, but this was actually probably movable. This probably went up and down a few inches, maybe, you know, 6-8 inches or better. So that's probably what that is. When they got to where they were going and ready to fire it, they adjusted this to put this down onto the ground. And I'll show you what I think it was. But that would stabilize it, okay? Give it more stability. Plus, it would take off some of the pressure being applied to these railroad cars when it was fired. All right? So if you can imagine, this being lowered down gave this more stability. Of course, these would be attached together, but make it more stable. Now, that would explain why on the inside here, this is the inside, there was only 35 valves, because they were right in this area. Now, what all these other ones were for on the front, way out here, I don't know. Probably, you know, some kind of stabilization thing they had going on. Now, I got to thinking, well, if you put that down and there's a recoil on here, you know, what's it going to do to this? And because I've watched some videos, there's some videos out there on YouTube of the firing of this gun. And you have to be careful, because in them videos they put a lot of other types of guns. So you have to be able to pick out the Dora out of them videos. And most of the shots are from a distance. But from the best that I could tell, this looks like when it fired, it had a recoil of maybe 10 to 20 feet where you could see it move. Okay? But I got to thinking, you know, if this was down on the ground, this would have to slide along the ground. Well, if you remember from these pictures, they put these extra pieces in here that I said were to stabilize the railroad ties and the track and all that, because it fired when it was in a curve. All right, and that was done to stabilize all that, so when it fired, the tracks and the railroad ties didn't move out of position. But if you notice from these pictures, this one here, this one section is right down between the middle of the tracks, okay? So that means you could lower this, because as you can tell, this is, I don't think this was as wide as the tracks. It could have been, because if you look at it, it's as wide as the wheels. So this could have rested on all of this. Could have rested on the tracks, on this thing here, and on this other track. And when it fired, you know, it slid along all that, okay? And that also would give it some resistance to keep it from going 50, 60 feet down the track. Because one guy wrote that he felt that it was maybe some kind of braking system. Well, I guarantee you, when they set these tracks up, they were probably dead level. There was probably no slope in them. They didn't have to worry about a runaway train. So I guarantee you these tracks, wherever they went, were set up dead level. And I think I'm beginning to think more and more that when they did, like a couple guys that suggested, and it was even in an article that one guy sent me, number one Chirikawa, I think his name was. He sent me an article that was on a forum that they talked about these hydraulic devices. So that makes sense, you know, that they got to where they were set up, ready to fire. They lowered this down, and it probably rested on all this right here, two sets of tracks and this piece in the middle. And that gave it some stability. Like I said, they talked about a lot of recoil on this thing. That one guy said that the wheels on the cars would damage the tracks. Well, you know, I'm leaning more towards the fact that they did this to take some of that weight off of all this when they fired it and rested her down on the ground. So that was, I think that's pretty much going to be agreed to, that's what them valves were for. Some kind of leveling system. All right. Now you can see my model, how I talked about how wobbly it is on here, okay? Because this bridge here, smaller bridges, are not glued to them railroad cars. But I think once I get them joined together and get them on both of them, it'll probably alleviate that problem, okay? And talking about brakes on these railroad cars, there is a shot in one of the videos. Let me see if I can back this up a little bit so you can see it. You see that right here? What looks like some type of hand crank, where you can see one of the guys standing up on here spinning this thing. So I think that was part of the braking system right there. All right, but yeah, I'm convinced that this is the way this thing went down the railroad tracks to get to where it was going. You know, you had this one here, and then this one was on the other set of bogies. Now that guy that I read that article from that Chirikawa sent me, I think in the article, if I remember reading it right, that this was all disassembled and put on railroad cars and brought to the site. Now, why would you want to do that? Why would you want to take railroad cars and put them on top of railroad cars? I believe this thing rode down the tracks like this to get to where it was going. Now, you also remember we were talking about the height. I took a measurement on this because one guy asked me how it would go through tunnels. And I took a measurement of this thing and said it was like 85 millimeters. And I converted it, and it came out to be about 21, maybe 22 feet high. But what you have to remember is this is a model, okay? how accurate is this model to the real gun. All it takes is a few millimeters here in this model to throw it off in real life to a few feet, you know. So you don't know how accurate this really is to the real gun. So, you know, I say 85 millimeters, maybe it was only 80, you know, and they built the model like this to make it look more pleasing to the eye, because if they'd have squeezed this together, it might not have looked as good, so they took it on their own to make this bigger. I don't know, but that's, you have to take that into consideration. I'm measuring a model that we don't know how accurate it really is. So and then another guy wrote to me and said that the standard for tunnels over there was 18.5 to 19 feet. I don't know. So I'm within a couple feet of that by measuring it. And, you know, if they came to that problem where they couldn't get through a tunnel, they probably found another way around, another route to get to where they wanted to go. I'm sure there was railroad tracks all over the place over there at the time. All right, so yeah, we had a nice little response from my question, and I think we got that solved, what all these valves were for. It makes sense. It really does. I really do believe that if you look at that, it does look like a hydraulic piston with a lot of support pushing down on these whatever, and this was not really attached, and it floated and it shoved it down to stabilize it. It makes a lot of sense. It really does. So, and then I got, well, I was looking at this. You see how this is made right here? I thought, well, maybe that's set down in between the railroad tracks, but that, there's no way they could do that, because if that did recoil, it would destroy them railroad tracks. It would rip them out. But I think they just got rid of some of the metal in there so that there wasn't as much friction when it slid on this stuff right here. So yeah, it makes sense now that you study it and you look at it. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and I really want to appreciate and thank all the guys that did comment, you know, because you know, that's what you got to do. You got to bring some minds together, and I really do appreciate that, because that had me stumped. It was bothering me. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and I got to get some ladders made up here. These little things. I got to build these. You know, I got to trim them yet. I got to trim some of these pieces off, but they'll go like that. And I got to put the little rungs in between them. I think that one came from over there. And get that railing on. And I'm going to hold off on painting this. Oh, I want to show you one more thing here. I got how I did. Remember I showed you I did this. Well, I got it sitting on here. And I'm going to put you on pause a second, get the camera off the tripod, and bring you down so you can see in there and see what I've done. All right, hold on. Okay, so here's that color call out, and I was showing you earlier how there's that gap in there. Okay, well, after doing that work, and I got a piece of white paper laying back there. Let's see if we can see this. There's my gap. Okay. And right here, right in there is that 2 millimeters of styrene I added. So you can see now how it raised it up off of that car. And if you remember a couple videos ago, it was almost sitting right on that mat, and it was resting right on this car right here. Okay, so now I got her up to what I think she should be like. more prototypical of what the real thing is. And I'm not bragging. I'm not, trying to say, hey, I'm right and other people are wrong. But I've noticed a lot of other guys from looking at their models, they didn't go through this process. I've seen some very nice looking models of this thing that guys have built this, and they've got the larger bridge just sitting right down on that photo etch right there, instead of having that gap like I got. Okay. Now, like I said, I don't think it makes much difference because of the way it's rocking. It wouldn't make any difference if it was sitting all along there or just in that little spot. But I need to do something about this. I really don't want to glue these cars together because I have a little bit of flexibility in setting it up. These wheels on these railroad cars, they just fit on the tracks in there. They could have been about a half a millimeter or a millimeter wider, but they just barely fit on there. It's not a very good fit. So I have to get this out of here, this rocking out of here, otherwise it's probably going to knock them off the tracks. But I got an idea what I think I might do to stabilize that. But like I said, once you get both of these two halves glued together and they're both sitting on them railroad cars, I think it's going to take a lot of that out of there. It won't be as loose as what it looks like, you know what I mean? Alright, well, we'll play around with it a little bit. I'm going to go ahead and get these railings on and these steps on, and then this should ought to be pretty much done. Alright, enough for this section. Alright, while I'm waiting on my little ladders to set up, and let me tell you, that was a treat trying to get these little rungs in there between them two pieces. But I've got 4 of these, so while they're setting up, and I thought I'd start working on these boxes that go in between the two. But I wanted to show you something here. Now, I built a few Mobius models, the kit maker Mobius. I believe that's how you say it, Mobius. I built a couple Battlestar Galacticas, and I built the Batmobile. And one thing that they do in their process of making parts, and I don't know if you can see this, but this right here is at a 45-degree angle, okay? This seam all the way down along here. And then the mating part is also cut at a 45-degree angle. Now, like I said, Mobius does this on a lot of their kit makers, and it makes almost for an invisible seam line when you put the two together. Okay, so when you put these two together, there's hardly any seam line. Now here's one I just finished. I just did this one. And you can see there's no filling. I don't have to do any filling. It's a real good match. And I was thinking about that when I was gluing these two halves together, okay, why they didn't have two 45-degree angles there, and you wouldn't have had this big long seam line. I wish more kit manufacturers would do this. Which one's here? But I wish a lot more manufacturers would do this, because it makes for a much nicer joint. It really does. There's no filling involved usually if you do it right and get it clamped together good. No seam line at all. So I'm going to go ahead and finish up these boxes. I got a bunch of little, you probably can't see them, bunch of little eye bolts go in up here. I think there's 8 per box. And then these are pretty much done. Will be finished. That was a piece of cake. And then I got to start on something else before I can really get to the point where I can paint this. Alright, so I'm going to go ahead and finish this up and get my ladders on and clean them up. And we'll be back in a little bit. Okay, so here's what I'm up to. Got my boxes completed. They're all together. Got those little eye hooks up on the top. Right there, all down along top and bottom. So those are complete. All I got to do is paint them and put some decals on them. Now I'm working on these rail cars. Remember how I was showing you how unstable this was? See how it's rocking real bad? Well, what I done was I went ahead and cut me some little styrene pieces here again. That's 0.75 millimeter thick. And then I took my hole punch, okay, and punched a hole in the middle of them. And then I got to come along with my knife and just ever so slightly ream that hole out. Just get it a little bit bigger. And then I'm going to take these and put them on here, okay, on these pins that stick down. And that will take out this rocking. Let me get this back on here. There it is. See that rocking? I got two of them on here. About 90% of that rocking's gone, almost all of it. Okay. And this is what it looks like right there. Now I got to paint them up, get them painted, and get them on there. I'll just glue it real good and heavy right there. So then they'll fit down on there, and that piece of plastic will sit on that car. And that will take that rocking out of there. See that? See that? So that's what I got to do. So I just go ahead and I'll hand paint these. I'll hand primer them, hand paint them. I don't need to do the bottom of them. I just need to do one side because you can see it down in there. So I'll just get these primered and painted and get them glued on there. That way I won't have to glue these small bridges onto these rail cars. And now I got some stability with it. That's going to work out great. Alright, we'll see where we're at with this video. Today's Tuesday. It's Tuesday night. My granddaughter's coming over. Got something going on tomorrow, Wednesday, that's probably going to fill up the rest of my week. So I'm going to try and get this done. These little ladders, I am having one hell of a time. I'm letting them set up. I'm going to let them set up overnight. But I'm having one hell of a time. I glued on two little pieces up here. There's where's it at? I can't even find it. There's a piece right here I glued on that sticks out and catches the bottom of that ladder. And then there's a little piece up here that catches on the side of it. And let me tell you, I sat here for 45 minutes playing around trying to get them little pins to match up and then get it on that thing. So they're not quite set up yet. I'm going to let them set up overnight and they'll be a little stiffer and I can mess with it tomorrow. I might be cutting off these little, there's a little, I mean it's so tiny you can't even see it. There's a little pin sticks out there on both of them that goes into a little hole. Where's it at? It goes into a little hole on either side of this, and it's just it's such a tight fit. It just I I might just be cutting them off, and they're right here. I'm so focused that it's messing everything up. There's two little pins on there. I just might shave them off and just glue that ladder on there. Sitting here trying to get them little pins to line up is a treat. Alright, so I got to go ahead and get these primered up before my granddaughter gets over here. And I'll be putting these probably on tomorrow. I might have a little time to come down here, but my week's going to be pretty much shot. So that is going to work. I'm pleased with that. Alright, that's it for this one.